It's a day like any other. You're on your phone, casually strolling through Twitter when you come across a particular tweet saying, "Is it just me? Or are puppies not really that cute?" Annoyed, you start furiously typing a 280 character rebuttal until you notice that you're not the only one offended by the audacity to post such a tweet. In a matter of seconds, a barrage of tweets already starts pouring in, some still constructive, most just plain hateful. Either way, you know it's only a matter of time until OP eventually comes to grips with a stingy cancel culture, and well, gets cancelled. But first, what exactly is cancel culture? First used in 2016, Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the term cancel culture as the practice or tendency of engaging in mass canceling as a way of expressing disapproval and exerting social pressure. In other words, cancel culture occurs when someone, usually in social media, expresses or does something groups deem offensive and problematic, and in turn, warrants rejection and backlash from the public. For instance, it is what happened to Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling after voicing out transphobic remarks on Twitter back in 2020, or to Filipino celebrity Tony Gonzaga when she openly expressed her support for dictator's son Bongbong Marcos during his presidential campaign in 2022. Prominent personalities like these two draw flack for their supposedly problematic takes and behaviors, as the public seems to develop a shared conscience and tries, often aggressively, to correct such mistakes, perhaps in good faith. However, as the demand for political correctness intensifies more and more, this cancel culture is somehow becoming less and less like an accountability check, and rather, more and more like a modern day witch hunt, where groups seem to look for a gotcha moment from famous celebrities and public figures. But why? Whereas different disciplines each have their own way of explaining the intricacies behind cancel culture, so too does social psychology provide concepts which may help us better make sense of these particular thoughts and behaviors. For one, cancel culture may be seen as a manifestation of conformity, or the change in behavior or belief as the result of real or imagined group pressure. Many classical experiments have succeeded in showing this innate tendency to think and act the same way as other people do. The Sheriff autokinetic illusion research, for example, which studied the influence other people have on an individual's perception of a certain illusion, has provided the basis for norm formation. That is, people tend to form their own norm when they are together in the same space. In the digital space specifically, cancel culture may very well be this norm. People may be inclined to join the hate train because, in the first place, this tendency for norm formation renders them easily susceptible to the influence of others, because it is innate for people in groups to use others as a model of reality, to the point that their judgment and their perception would also become akin to that of others. When an individual is exposed to a large presence of hateful sentiment, this hateful sentiment may then more or less be treated by them as a reality, and eventually adopted as one's own judgment. Thus, cancel culture ensues. Another experiment, the ash line judging research, which delved on the extent to which people would yield to others' perceptual judgment over their own, has also distinguished the ways in which people would conform to social pressure. The first of these ways, informational influence, is when an individual conforms because they view the group as a source of information. We have already covered this earlier. Cancel culture may occur as a result of people viewing the pervading opinion of others as a reference to which they can model their own opinions from and cancel others on these particular grounds. The second way, normative influence on the other hand, is when an individual conforms because they want to fit in with a group and not be seen as a deviant. As seen in this light, cancel culture may be what's happening when people cancel others because the majority is canceling them as well. In this sense, cancel culture may be seen as a trend, a movement which people must ride on, lest they risk being the odd one out, being thought of as having the slightest association with the people already being cancelled, and perhaps eventually becoming the very ones being cancelled as well. Basically, people may paradoxically cancel others to avoid being cancelled themselves. Indeed, it seems that much of cancel culture has to do with group influence. An individual may engage in the act of canceling because, in one way or another, they are compelled by the particular group that they belong in, which also engages in that same act. And this is all the more so when various group processes are also at play, such as the individuation, or the state in which a person loses their self identity and personal responsibility due to the anonymity and reduced self awareness they feel within a group. When a person is in this state, they are more likely to ascribe their impulsive and destructive behaviors to the group's norms and not as part of their own volition. In much the same way, it is easy to cancel people, send hate tweets when you know that you're simply one among the many anonymous users who also do the exact same thing as you. You would not come to feel guilt or remorse as much upon doing so, or even consider the possibility of getting in trouble because in your head, everyone's doing it, so why shouldn't you? When you see yourself not as your own person, but as a mere member of the crowd, it becomes quite easy to lose sight of your sense of accountability and pay no mind to the consequences of your action, even if such action means aggression toward others, warranted or not. Apart from losing their personal identity and responsibility, people's ability to think critically can also be reduced, if not lost, when groupthink is at work. This, on the other hand, is a mode of thinking in which an individual adopts the general viewpoint of a cohesive group, whether they accept it or not, all for the sake of unanimity. Groupthink occurs because the individual overestimates the beliefs of the group and even regards it as impervious to criticism, which then leads to poor decision making as any alternative information is easily disregarded. This is quite evident in cancel culture, especially with how it treats dissenting voices. Because it only builds upon the pre-existing consensus, it fails to consider that some views, other than what has already been established by the group, may be worth looking into as well, rather than being cancelled right then and there. With such belief put into the group, the person loses their ability to think critically for themselves and decide whether to hear the other person out or to join the group and cancel them. Whatever the actual dynamic is behind cancel culture, ultimately, the end result, whether intentional or not, is one and the same: to shun people. Which is why cancel culture can be seen as a modern form of social ostracism, or the deliberate act of excluding people from groups. People who have been targets of cancel culture have indeed been ostracized, boycotted, and have had people's support withdrawn from them because they have aired out something the public finds disagreeable. They would lose their fan base, their mass following, sometimes their career, even their very credibility the minute they start trending for something they might have said or done. All of these down the drain because of this new form of ostracism. But as studies on ostracism show the myriad of negative effects it has on an individual's psychological well-being, such as mental health illnesses and neglected basic human needs, it is worth asking, should this kind of culture even persist? Or should we finally cancel culture? Essentially, cancel culture should be a means for people to call out and seek accountability from certain people for their problematic takes and behaviors. This, however, does not seem to be the case, especially considering how people who have actually been cancelled, despite possibly losing some fans or being in the public's eye for a while, are still thriving to this day and even espousing the same flawed views that led them to be cancelled in the first place, as though nothing had ever really happened. J.K. Rowling still hasn't conceded and admitted fault for the whole anti-trans controversy, yet projects are still lining up for her. Toni Gonzaga was even able to hold her own concert just earlier this year, and she still hasn't acknowledged the reason why she has been cancelled, insisting that her critics are mere haters. So maybe cancel culture is not really so effective an approach. Not only does it fail to do what it is supposed to, in that people aren't necessarily held into account when they are cancelled. Furthermore, cancel culture probably does more harm than good, particularly for the social awareness that it tries to propagate in the first place. If the goal really is to make people become more socially aware, it is first important to recognize that all of us have varying access to privilege, which leads to our also varying levels of consciousness. No one is really born already equipped with the necessary deep understanding of society, that they never fail to practice political correctness in everything they do since birth. Instead, people know what they know now because they have had the privilege to learn about these things. There's formal or informal education, access to information, and other opportunities which made them more aware now than they are before. Not everyone has the same luxury, however, and this lack of opportunity may be to blame for what is deemed as distorted views and erroneous behaviors. Some of these people may really be just susceptible to and oftentimes fall prey to disinformation. So if there is one thing that must indeed be cancelled, it's not really these people, but those who deliberately and maliciously spread false information for their personal gain. Those who take advantage of the fact that people have less so they can gain more. Perhaps these are the ones that must be cancelled. But this is not to say that people with problematic takes must be left unchecked. Those who are misinformed must still be held accountable, not necessarily by canceling them, since such an antagonizing and divisive approach would merely drive them away further rather than raise their awareness, but by giving them the chance to take responsibility for what they did, to actually learn, or more precisely, unlearn, like we probably once did, and eventually become potential allies like we are now. There may be people who would be too hesitant to back down, but this is why tireless persuasion is needed, and not just blatant cancel culture. Discourse must be encouraged for us to develop, but of course, we must remember that there are certain things which should not be up for debate, a prime example of which is the subject of human rights. Ultimately, rather than cancel culture, perhaps it is high time that we begin to foster a culture of compassion, growth, and unity as we strive toward what is actually right and against those which are actually wrong, those that actually need to be cancelled. So, despite your love for puppies, before you could even hit that tweet button, you now find yourself deleting your response one word after another, putting down your phone as you think hard to yourself. Should OP really be the one who's cancelled? Or should we now cancel culture once and for all?